I'd like to call to order the Thursday, May 8th meeting of the Westwood School Committee. And we'll stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you, as always, to Westwood Media Center, which is live streaming this meeting and recording for later viewing on its platforms. We appreciate it. I'll hand it over to Tim.
Sure, thank you. And happy to be here tonight. And we'll start off with the superintendent's report as we do, and just some things we've seen around Westwood Public Schools. So I want to start with the students in our lower star program at Sheehan, who wrote books in their classrooms with their teacher, Miss Aranesis, who reached out to the public library to see if we could put their books on display in the town's library. So it's a great event there, and happy to have everybody out for that. Over at Thurston, we recently had the Thurston Writers Conference with writers like ESPN's Mike Reese. Happy. I know Caitlin, you had spent a bunch of time over there that day and came back raving about the day. I was unfortunately double booked, but happy to do that. Martha Jones recently had their MJ Walk to School Day, and went. Oh, I'm sorry, I started zoning through everything. Recently had their Walk to School Day, where we're promoting healthy behavior and safe routes to schools by encouraging kids to walk to school. I don't know what's happening with this is sliding around. At the high school staff was celebrating School Lunch Hero Day, so you may see some familiar folks from the classroom behind serving food in the cafeteria. So we were happy to do that. Recently, the high school had their accreditation visit. I think certainly the committee knows about that. I know a couple of you were involved in meeting with members from the accreditation team. So this is our NIASC steering and collaborative conference team. So they were here for a couple of days. Certainly it was a large effort on behalf of the staff at the high school to be ready for the self-assessment for the NIASC visit. Typically it's done every 10 years. It's been, about 16 years here, I think, due to some changes that happened in the NIASC process in the late 2000s, and then what we know happened around 2020, pushing everything back a couple of years. So, but happy to have folks come in to do the NIASC assessment here. And then finally, we recently had Student Government Day at the State House. Students Sarah Luna Sassine and Georgia Perry meeting with Representative McMurtry and Senator Rush. So happy to have them there at the State House. So, and thank you to the rep and the senator, as always, for their participation in working with our students. So, some great things happening around the district, as always. I don't know what is going on with this machine right now, so my apologies for that. I'm trying to do two things at once, and I'll try not to do that again. Just wanted to provide an update around our strategic planning process. So our strategic planning team, we put that together. We've got a really great group of people that we are meeting in a hybrid format every other Thursday. We have had 3 sessions at this point. We've had 3 sessions at this point in time. We began with looking at our portrait of a graduate, really exploring it, thinking about, we started a protocol called Back to the Future. So if we think about our current kindergarten students, or our incoming kindergarten students, who are going to graduate in 2038, which is a really scary year to think about. Yeah. What do we want them to be seeing? What do we see? What do we feel? What do we hear? What do we experience in 2038 when we get there? And then we started to ask some questions and really look at some data in the district to see what's our current state. That was our last session. We've identified a draft version of some focal areas that we're going to bring to our admin council team next week. And then we're going to start to develop goals with the strategic planning team. It's a really great group of individuals. I know those that are participating. I don't know if you have any thoughts that you want to share about the process so far.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think it's a great group. I really like how you're facilitating things and getting everybody in small groups to share visioning. I think it's really interesting how even when we're at our own separate tables talking about completely different topics, the same themes come up. And so I'm hoping maybe that makes things easier, that we're having.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
If the groups came up with totally different ideas, then we have a bigger challenge on our hands.
Yeah.
But it's a good sign.
I was really pleased to see that we have such good student participation as well. Some really strong comments from students, which is great.
Yeah. No, I double down on all that. I think what The question you asked after the first session was, name one feeling you're feeling after this session. And, the positivity, the excitement, the hopefulness, just the idea that we can be so hopeful for something that feels so far in advance, but that we have influence over right now is a lot of fun to forecast out that far.
Well, I thank you both for your participation and for all the rest, including the folks that are here in this room that are participating. And we look forward to sharing more about this in the future. So one of the things that we want to talk about today was to talk about our curriculum review process. So I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin to do this part of the
Thank
meeting.
you. Yeah, so this is my first curriculum review update to this committee, and I'm really excited for it. And I thought I would start with just a framing of the process. This is probably review for you all, but there might be folks watching from home who aren't familiar with how we do this work. So the curriculum review process is how we ensure that our programming and our curriculum across content areas is rigorous, relevant, aligned to the standards, and yielding really excellent outcomes for all of our students. It's a cyclical process, so in any given year, there's new program areas entering into the review and new program or other program areas that are concluding. And I would say, based on looking at the past calendars and what I would project for the years to come, the review comes around every 6 to 8 years. I think COVID probably had an impact, but every 6 to 8 years, you can expect the departments head into a curriculum review to really reflect on what we're doing and where we want to go and how to get there. If you can go to the next slide. So the curriculum review process is broken into 3 phases. Every program starts in the audit and analyze phase, and that is taking stock of what do we do? What do we have currently? What are our program offerings? What are our curricular resources? What are the standards that we are aligned to? What does our staffing look like? What are our resources? And then using all of that data to attempt to answer, to what extent is our program rigorous, relevant, and serving all students? At the end of that big data collection and analysis time, a program or department will come up with a theory of action, kind of an if-then statement. Noticing where our gaps are, really thinking about where do we want to go, what's our intended outcome here, and then what do we think are the steps that are going to get us there, and that is the theory of action piece. Then they switch into the research and development phase, which is trying to understand how do we best get to that outcome. During this time, a department might visit other schools and districts to see, if they're doing this thing that we're curious about, let's go see it in action. We might pilot curricular resources if we've determined that there's a gap between what we're using and what we think is best for our students. We might go out and procure some different materials, have some pilots here in-house. There's professional development. If we've determined that there's a capacity need, we need to learn how to do this thing better so that we can serve our students. So all of that is happening during research and development. And then at the end of that time, the department comes up with their action plan. Here's where we want to go. We've discovered, we've determined, we've done the research to figure out what's the best way for us to get there and do this. They come up with the action plan for how we're going to implement that. And then they move into implementation. So implementation is just as busy as all the rest of the phases because that includes what's the professional development that the whole department or the whole district needs so that we can do this well. What's the communication plan? How do we make sure our families and communities know the changes that we're making and why these are important? Our students, do they understand why we're doing something differently or updating things in a certain way? And also the assessment plan. How will we know that we have achieved the outcomes we thought we were going to? So all of that is part of implementing. That implementation phase lasts until you re-enter the curriculum review. So when you come back around to the audit phase, up until then, you're still implementing and assessing on your last results. And then what are some of the outcomes that could result from a curriculum review? I'm going to back up because something I should have said earlier is that I think the name curriculum review, we're certainly looking at curriculum. We're looking at vertical alignment to standards. What are the curricular resources? But that name doesn't also, or it should also include that we're looking at instructional strategies, we're looking at assessments, we're looking at how are we partnering with families in the community in this content area or through this program. So it's a lot more than just the curriculum. So when a department is going through a review, these are what I call the foundational outcomes. This is what has to come out of it. We need a departmental mission and vision that's aligned with our district plan and our district portrait of a graduate that's going to help the department make decisions down the road. If we're debating between different programs or different areas of focus, we need something that we can go back to say, here's our mission, here's what we value, and here's how we're going to make a tough decision. We need a consistent written curriculum, and that is always a work in progress as teachers are updating what they do, incorporating new professional learning. And then with our equity lens applied to this curriculum review process, one of our foundational outcomes is that if we uncover that there are achievement gaps during this audit, if you're looking at your student data and seeing that there's disproportionate outcomes, disproportionate enrollment in upper level classes, if you're seeing those things, then your action plan needs to have a plan to address them. And then departments might go a million different directions with what else they want to work on. Yes, you can go ahead. So here's where we are with curriculum reviews in progress. Kicking off this year were both performing arts and visual arts. There was nobody in research and development. I think Allison Borchers was really wonderful at tying up a lot of loose ends before she moved on. We do have digital literacy, computer science, and library media that are in the implementation phase. They wrapped up their review last year and then have spent this year starting to implement the recommendations that came out. Beginning next year, so this one I want to take a minute to explain, because this will be a new news to the committee. We're looking at guidance and then also literacy for next year. So you've heard me say that guidance was on deck for this year, and that was what we were hoping to do. We determined pretty early on that we needed an external facilitator to help us with that review. Westwood has not done a guidance review before, and the guidance program is very different from your sort of traditional curriculum review. It's not the literacy or the science department or the math department. It's a different type of program. So we thought it's going to be helpful for us if we could have somebody externally helping guide this process. We were in conversations with MASCA, the Massachusetts School Counselors Association. They do program reviews like this. And then early in the new year, we found out that the person who leads that arm of the organization was resigning, and there hasn't been news on whether that program is continuing. So since then, we have been actively working to try to find a different partner. This is also when the NEASC work really came into forefront, and so certainly people were very busy working on that. And we just, at this point in the year, it doesn't seem likely that we would get a guidance review up and running in the last few weeks of school. So we are going to continue to look for that external partner and be ready to launch next year. And then literacy and ELA as well. Getting into what's been happening so far. So this is, I wanted to talk a little bit about the performing arts and visual arts launches this year. You'll notice that some things are similar and some things are different, and I think that is what I love about the curriculum review process, is that there's some things that are always the same and then some things that look completely different. Our performing arts team has been working as a whole department, K-12. They've been revising the performing arts mission statement, and they've been aligning their curriculum to current standards. They're working towards that consistent written curriculum K-12. So the department's been coming together throughout the year, working on those two big projects. From now till the end of the year, the work that they are focusing on is crosswalking that departmental mission to the portrait of a graduate. The portrait of the graduate didn't exist back in the fall when they were working on this, so now we have to make sure that they're aligned. We also want to visit classrooms, get our educators into each other's classrooms, having them shadow students. This is, again, part of that audit of what is the lay of the land, what does our performing arts instruction look like across the domains, across the grade levels, across the schools. So getting teachers out and about to see each other, and then creating that steering committee that will meet over the summer and help us move a little faster come next year. So that's where performing arts is right now. Visual arts went a little bit opposite order. They convened the steering committee first, had a couple of meetings with the steering committee, and then just recently did a K-12 departmental launch with one of our early release Wednesdays, where the team looked at the vertical progression of our artistic skills and habits through student work. Their plans, that department's plans for May and June, again, is to take that mission and look at the portrait of a graduate and look for areas of alignment and potential for revision, classroom visits, and then the steering committee is looking to identify those data look-fors that will help guide our summer and fall work. What are the pieces of data that will help us know whether the program is rigorous and relevant and meeting the needs of all students? So those are where we are with those. And then digital literacy, computer science, and library, they've been implementing this year, and they have been busy. So it's incredible what they've been able to implement this year. The DLCS expanded special in grades 2 through 5 has been a huge success this year. There's a new technology coaching model at Thurston, developing new DLCS learning targets. At the high school level, there's an expanded computer science course sequence that has increased access for students. We now have more students that are able to take computer science courses because of this. There's been a district-wide focus on AI literacy and AI professional learning for teachers. And that is something that will be ongoing and ever evolving. On the library side, I think the highlight here is the reinstatement of the Thurston librarian. We have Kenny Stein doing an amazing job rebuilding, revitalizing that Thurston library and making it a space where students want to be and where teachers want to be too. I was just there yesterday. I was there today and I was there yesterday, but I was in the library yesterday. And the different student groups that were around engaging in the different collections and activities that Ms. Tyne has in there. It was really fun to see. And then another piece of the library recommendations from their review was to expand the elementary programming beyond the library class with things like author visits and book clubs. If you have kids in any of the elementary schools, I think they've all had author visits at this point, which has been really fun to see. And of course, the different book clubs and organizations that our librarians are taking on. And then the final thing that I wanted to talk about, since I have this audience and our families and communities that might be watching, is how do we think about family and community engagement through this process? And this is something that the curriculum review process is built to have multiple touch points for family and community engagement. It doesn't look the same in every review, certainly, and it doesn't even look the same throughout the review. But one thing that happens is the steering committee for each curriculum review often includes a member of the school committee as a representative, and also can include parents or community members. We ask for student and family feedback throughout the process. So it is a part of the audit and analyze phase. That's something every department will do, is get feedback from our students and get feedback from the families on how they are experiencing the programming. So in terms of visual arts and performing arts, as those are the ones that are in progress right now, families next fall can expect to be hearing from those departments. And again, the departments, we haven't figured this out. The summer work is going to be to determine, are we doing a survey? Are we doing focus groups? Are we doing some mix of those things? How are we getting that feedback for what's the state of our current program? And then as we go through with research and development, what we might find is that we have community experts that can help us learn about something new, might help inform our understanding of a particular department or program or resource. Implementing and assessing is another time where families might see focus groups or surveys come home to help us understand, did we do the thing we said we were going to do? Is the experience being felt by our students and families? Parent community expert advisors throughout the process. We are fortunate to have parents and community members here in Westwood who are experts in their field and willing to give of their time and talents to improve our curriculum and programming. And then school committee updates. This is another way that families and communities can stay up to date. You can expect me coming back every spring with the update on where we are, where we're going, if not before then, especially if we're looking at a new curriculum adoption, major shifts in programming. Those would come more often than once a year. And I think that is the quick and very big picture.
So just want to pause before I move to the next thing under superintendent's report to see if there are any questions or comments from the committee.
I actually do have a question. So you mentioned that the cycle is every 6 to 8 years. So does that mean that every 6 to 8 years we're starting at the audit and analyze for a particular topic? And then it takes another 2 years to implement?
Yes, I want to clarify, it's not that we're only focusing on one at a time. So like this year we have 2, next year we have 2 more starting. So there's several reviews going on at once,
Right.
which I wasn't sure if that was, you were saying it's only one going on.
I'm just
every year?
thinking about,
Oh, the time between launching and getting recommendations in place?
Well, like how, like if we did a math review, like starting this year, would we not then be implementing another one until 8 to 10 years from now? example?
Generally, unless, there are always, unless things change that tell us, no, we need to look at this sooner. So often, there will be new standards that are released from DESI, and so then we need to make sure that we are aligned to the new standards that come out.
Okay.
There are changes in practices that we need to implement faster. So the short answer would be yes. Generally, every 8 or so years, the department
like
would
the-
start review again.
The formal process?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think we can be quicker when needed.
Yeah, if I can add, I think that's the default process, and maybe a better word than formal. And so I would say, as an example, if through, because there also should, and we've talked about the alignment of the report to the graduate, once we have a strategic plan in place, the curriculum review cycle should also be aligned with the strategic plan that's in place, right? So if in our plan as we develop it, we say that we want to prioritize this particular curricular area as an area of focus. My assumption is that in our planning, we would then intend for that to jump the line from where it may have been, because we have the default plan, but then we want to respond to what the needs are on the ground.
Okay. Thanks.
I can ask a different question. I think we actually talked about this the first time I met you. So there's a strategy we're working on, and then you have these curriculum reviews. Inevitably, what happens, in my observation, is they oftentimes ask for more resources and more time, which are two big constraints, as we know, the biggest constraints. I guess, how do you balance, you're gonna have a strategy, and in strategy, you're gonna have to say some things we're not gonna do, and some things we are gonna do in those two constraints. I guess, how do you think about that kind of intersection, I guess? Or what's been your observation?
This is absolutely the challenge, because I do think often we maybe want to go towards the best way to improve our program is to expand our program. And so I think this is where the foundational outcomes help a little bit, where we say, first, this is what we need to get in place, and that is no small feat, those 3 bullet points. It doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're thinking about a pre-K through 12 program, it is a lot. That is a lot of work. So if we've got that under control, then I think that's where we might look into, okay, how do we expand? How do we grow the program in different ways? I also think a lot of this can shake out through the audit and analyze phase, where we come away with lots of things that we want to do, but then we do have to, and this is really hard for me, so I appreciate how hard it is for all of our departments. There's so much we want to do, and we are all humans with full-time jobs as is, and there's only so much change that we can manage and sustain effectively. So there are many, many things that we might want to do, and we do have to prioritize. And so sometimes it's not the get bigger, expand, it's the let's look at how do we maximize enrollment in what we are currently offering before we add something new, or how do we make sure our instructional practices are meeting the needs of all kids before we try this new curriculum piece.
Yeah, if I can just add on to that as well, because I agree with everything that Caitlin just said. And I'd also say that in that audit and analyze phase, I think it's important that the context is not just within the department that is the subject of the review, but how that department fits within the context of the ecosystem of a grade level or grade span or a school as a whole, right? We've had that conversation. I think we've had that conversation publicly. I know I've also had it with individual committee members. So, for example, the recent review of the World Language Department, right, there were recommendations about expansion. The issue is if you expand into lower grades, it means that something else is impacted, right? So it'd be irresponsible to move forward with those recommendations without completing a review process of those other areas. And then we can see how all of those go together, right? So that's that contextual piece that I think is really important, that needs to be part of this process as we layer on going forward.
I think sort of I have the inverse comment to that one, which is, we do this very robust review process. We come out with recommendations, some we accept, some we say aren't manageable, and then we start implementing them. I think what I would ask is, as we go through that process, if something then takes a right turn, that comes to us as well, right? So the world language is an excellent example, where we said we should expand that into, expand Mandarin into the middle school. And then the next we discussed, it was, we're removing the program, right? Clearly, that's like a right turn away from this very robust recommended process. So I think that should have come to us, and I think I said this
Yeah.
before. But when those things come up, where something comes up where you're kind of deviating from the review that you gave us 3, 4, 5 years ago, I think those also need to come in front of us, just so we understand the full picture and we're not kind of thinking we're going in one direction when really we're not. So that's the only thing I would say.
Something that I would like to institute within the process, so I neglected to mention also, when I came, I was so happy to see such a robust curriculum review process, and it's an opportunity to learn what's working well and where can we improve on it. One of the things that I would love to make a part of our process is regular check-ins on that implementation plan, because I do wonder if that's something that trails off, that we sort of 2 years go by, we've lost the focus on it, and we're not checking back in to see, did we meet the goals we set out, or if not, why not? What's the reason for a right turn, if there was one? So that is something that I'd love to add on to our process and make sure is a
That would be
regular.
That would be good.
I think this is just because of where we are in our negotiations with the contract. I'm always curious how the asked resources for, say, an expansion of a program or a new curriculum or a different way of teaching impacts the teacher's contract, and how do we, encourage that, include that discussion of these recommendations. The world language review talked about expanding into into the lower grades. How do we incorporate that recommendation as it might impact resources or time, or the teaching structure for contracts? So I don't have a question there. It's more of a statement of those sort of things. I feel like sometimes it's like, well, we can't do that because that's not written in the contract. So now we're in a contract review. It's like, well, let's bring those back up so that we don't lose them if there's an impact on those contracts, and how can we discuss those things?
So I will, recognizing that by your own admission, there wasn't necessarily a question in there.
Correct.
But I will say that you've identified, like, one of the push and pulls in any of these processes, whether it's the curriculum review process, whether it's a strategic planning process, is always about trying to find the balance between suspending constraints to figure out where we want to go and layering on constraints to make sure that what we develop is implementable, right? And so I just want to acknowledge that that's always some of the you used the phrase balancing act a minute ago, and I think that's the right phrase. And so I just want to acknowledge that that is part of the conversation through this process.
Any other comments?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
That was
Caitlin.
really helpful.
Actually, I don't have a thing for this, but Lemma, we'll move over to you two for a quarterly financial update.
Thank you. So I have attached a memo reporting to the school committee on the status of the operating budget at the end of the third quarter in March. It's our tradition to report at that time of year and to kind of look at our spending as compared to the prior year. It's good news, I would say, reassuring news, just that we are spending in line with where I anticipate we should be. We're at 66.7% committed at the end of Q3. Noteworthy things from this year is first that we are overspent, a little bit in substitutes, but we're always overspent a little bit in substitutes, I will admit. However, it's more than last year, so that's my flag on that. And this comes and goes, but we've been scrambling. I mean, we've seen a lot of leaves. This happens, and it's not the end of the year yet. Nevertheless, overall salary accounts, we are, in a good place to close the year. In non-salary accounts, it's the typical category. It's contracted services, where I see that we're in the red. We're 113% committed, so we spent more than what we've got there. There are other budget areas in non-salary accounts in which we've underspent, so that's where the balance is found. But student services contracted line was always a problem area. In this case, in this year, we're doing better than we did last year in that student services contract line. So we are 280K over budget. 73,000 of that is due to transportation services that were not previously anticipated. And I think 100K will be released. That's typically the rhythm that I observe at this time of year because we have a lot of encumbrances and commitments, contracts with folks, and sometimes the schedule does not allow all of that to be implemented during the year, and so we release some of the funds back. So I would say at the end of the day, it's about 110K maybe overspent, and that's much better than where we've been in prior years. Facilities, not as good. That's driving some of the pressure in contracted services. Is over budget by 360K. We've seen cost escalation in our maintenance contracts and in our subscription services. These are, contracts for ongoing services like elevator maintenance, fire panel maintenance, all of that. There is about 135K in on-call service contracts that will be released because there's not much work anymore that will happen in May and June. The bulk of that work honestly happens in the summer and during school vacation weeks, so those are behind us now. So I do think there'll be some relief, and we do have some projects that can be categorized as capital expenses, and so I look at that at the fiscal close. So all this said, it's a not very eventful third quarter report. I would say that's been the theme this year, that, these have been kind of dull, but dull is good in my world when it comes to financials, so we don't really want the pressures and the surprises. There have been years, of course, in which we've seen more pressure and where we've had to rely on the special education reserve. This is not one of those years. Our tuitions, they changed, the placements changed, but we are within our budget for tuitions this year. And also, overall, in terms of utilities and other expenses that are sometimes a little bit harder to predict, we are also falling within budget. That is good news. I would say in terms of activity, it's not in this report because this is an operating budget report, but just so that there's a lot coming up. I've been spending, more like encumbering furiously in our capital account. So we have annual capital that we've reserved, and we have been establishing contracts and opening POs for projects that would happen this summer. So you are aware that we have a high school roof restoration project that was approved at town meeting. Fingers crossed, it's not fully cleared to go, but we are hoping that we will be able to move forward with that project and start getting the roof ready by removing the solar panels in even as early as 2 weeks. So more to come. I'm sure Tim would communicate with the community about that to anticipate any impacts on the campus, the high school campus in particular, but that's a big project, altogether over $2 million there. There's also a roof replacement at the Thurston. It's a modular roof there, and that's also slated to happen this summer. There's an electrical panel upgrade, which will be voted at town meeting, but we've been moving forward with all the procurement pieces and contracts in the hope that that is approved at town meeting. I do think it is critical enough that we may need to do it, even if that vote fails. So this is why I've moved forward on the procurement piece for the Sheehan electrical panel replacements. And there are a few other miscellaneous projects. As you know, there's a solar canopy project, which isn't a project that we are paying for in terms of capital costs, but we will have an OPM that is attending to that and supporting that project. And we'll be overseeing it and coordinating the efforts between that and the other things that are happening. And there are always, smaller things that happen in our buildings. So we are looking forward to some of those. One thing at the high school that I'm hoping to pull off this summer is the installation of a dishwasher, hopefully to reduce our carbon impact and to reduce waste at this building. So that will be encouraging if that's completed this summer. And again, other principals from our elementaries and from the middle school have come to me with specific needs to address what they need in their buildings. So we will fit those in where we can. So that's kind of more where the meat of the activity is, and it's kind of not in the operating budget this year. But I would say I am pleased with how dull the last 3 quarters have been, despite the fact that it's made the reports not very exciting at the school committee meetings. Yeah.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take it, exactly.
Lemma, is the solar canopy project definitely happening?
Yes, I mean, I see no issues. I have not,
Okay.
I've asked Ameresco to keep me posted, and now we've moved to a point where we're having weekly meetings
Oh, good.
and checking in about the progress about those, and so we're in the PDR every Tuesday at noon.
Okay.
Yep.
Did we hire, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna remember the name, but the person that was gonna, the project manager?
The OPM?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, so I mean, this is where I want to give Lemma her credit.
Yeah.
Who has been
Only
acting
this.
on top of everything else that she does in her job as our OPM for these projects, so.
Learned a
So
lot
I
about
am
roofs.
happy, I am happy that in conjunction with the town, we hired an on-call OPM, Skanska is the firm that we're using, who is helping manage those projects.
Great.
And so,
Yes,
happy to
yeah,
have that support.
I'm very happy about having them on board. They will have both like a business lens and a coordination lens, so they're working to establish the week-by-week schedule for those projects. We'll have some site plans that we will release soon to show like what areas of the parking lots at the high school might be impacted. We've tried to minimize that as much as possible. And one thing that's reassuring is we'll have an on-site field supervisor, like someone here every day, all the hours of construction, overseeing the canopy and the coordination between the canopy and the roof project and other things happening, especially at the high school. Middle school is a little bit of a simpler project, but the high school, because of the coordination, will be significant.
Okay.
Yep.
And is that the person that or who would be coordinating with the rec department? I know the kids walk a lot back and forth between the fields and the school during camp.
I have already been in touch. We've met with the rec department to talk about safety and the considerations that are important. We talked about whether we need to close that rear loop for pickup and drop off. So far, I've been, reassured by the parties that we won't need to do that. Having to close that off might mean just a little bit of a traffic backup on Manhattan, but so far we don't see a need to do that. But we anticipate that we can have deliveries and big machinery moving around outside of those hours, and we're coordinating. And so we'll start to have more regular meetings with them.
That's great. Thanks.
We should just be prepared, given our lessons from last year, on like the Sheehan article and the budget, the town meeting. I think, this year's crowd may be an interesting crowd, so
That's a good
we
point.
should be prepared. Like the Sheehan people will say, why are we spending this for, so.
Yeah. As a reminder, I mean, I feel committed to that project because the panels are just at an age where we're no longer able to find replacement parts. And this project, from all of the consultants that have reviewed our buildings, every engineer, it's been unanimous that this rises to the top in terms of urgency for the capital projects at the Westwood School. So this is why it's just a no-brainer once we identified that it is the number one most important thing to take on, regardless of the other, sequencing and, priorities from the master plan. It was important to act on this right now.
No, I don't disagree.
Yeah, no, and the argument, right, because I think the question with that at town meeting is what happens if this doesn't pass?
Yeah.
Well, if this doesn't pass, then we will still have to pay this money, but it's gonna draw away from the educational needs of students in the district otherwise. So,
Because we have to prioritize the safety pieces and the critical function of the school.
So attend town meeting, I think is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
Do we know what order we are? I mean, I see that that's number 5, but do we know when?
I don't know.
Okay.
What, it's Article 5? That one?
It's Article 5,
Wow,
but I
that'd
don't
be
know if that
quick.
means it's for, okay.
Yeah, it'll be quick.
Yeah.
They go in order.
Generally go in order, unless someone makes a motion to change the order.
We should make a motion to go first.
all right, so that is the end of the superintendent's report this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we will open up public participation. We have to open a hearing specifically regarding school choice. If any members of the community would like to speak about that.
So if you want me to do some framing first, and then the
Please.
committee actually needs to vote to open the
Okay.
public hearing. But,
Thank you.
So we need to do this annually. This is under Mass General Law, Chapter 76, Section 12B. This is the inter-district school choice program, where districts are required to participate unless they vote not to participate. It's got to be taken annually. Westwood has never participated. It's the program where students who reside in another community would come to Westwood through a lottery system, and we would be obligated to keep those students through graduation. Again, Westwood has not participated historically, and my recommendation is we continue our historical practice. So,
Thank you. So we will vote on that later in the meeting, but can I have a motion to open up the public hearing for any members of the community that would like to speak about school choice?
So moved.
Second?
Motion passed. All in favor, sorry. Aye. Okay. Motion passed. Would anybody like to speak about school choice? I'm not seeing anybody. So can I have a motion to close that part of the hearing?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed, and now we will open up the floor for our kind of standard public participation. If any members of the community would like to speak, feel free to come up, share your name and address, and you have 3 minutes. Anybody? Not seeing anyone. Okay, so we will close public participation and move on to school committee updates. In terms of my update as chairperson, myself and Tony and some other members of the leadership team had what I thought to be a really productive meeting with Cropper, the demography group. And they're the group that informed the enrollment projections for the facilities study. So I guess my takeaways were, I didn't realize they designated Westwood as like an older town. So the average age of a Westwood resident is 44, which I guess is older than comparable towns. Shouldn't be. Oh, yeah, right? But that is where a lot of the projections come from. And I was also reassured at the way that they're kind of keeping tabs on how successful they are in the projections. Like looking at this past year, I think they came in at like 1.8% under, and their goal is always like a margin of error of 2%. This coming year, I think is, from what they said, is looking pretty good, but they're going to kind of stay on top of that, and we can make adjustments if necessary. So I felt reassured by that. I don't know, Tony, if you have anything to add after
Yeah,
that.
I mean, the other thing I think we clarified is that this was based on Westwood residents.
Yes.
And so the Boston students, we would need to, this is based on people obviously that live here. The Boston students, we would need to add in to whatever school. They go to Pine Hill now. And just more, something I didn't realize is the new Everett Street development actually is right now zoned for Downey. I didn't realize that.
Oh, I thought it was done for Pine
No,
Hill.
if you look at our zoning map.
Yeah, it is,
Or,
there's
sorry,
a,
district name,
yeah,
actually.
there's a, if you look, I mean, we have the zoning map up like literally across from Harley's desk in my office. The Downey district, the border is the railroad tracks.
Okay.
And so because 22 Everett is on the east side of the tracks, it is
Just
in the Downey
inside.
zone currently, yeah.
So we may just want to monitor that depending on.
Did they dig in at all to the decrease in Pine Hill?
Not really.
No.
Yeah, I think that it was part of the overall conversation about the aging piece, right? I think that was there in terms of, like, we didn't dig in with detail what the, for example, age range of people that live in the Pine Hill district are. Because we talked about that sort of more on a macro level than we did on the individual school level. I think knowing some of our own internal conversations around 22 Everett, because I'll admit I didn't realize either, the fact that that is not zoned for Pine Hill, I think actually has an impact on those numbers as well too, for sort of how we conceptually think about it. But I don't think there was anything that really jumped out at me one way or the other than what we talked about previously, right?
Yeah, and the only thing they think about from a zoning perspective is they knew 22 Everett was already on its way, but they didn't take into consideration that a lot of the, whatever it was called, the T Act, a lot of those parcels were over in that, Islington or Downey area. They didn't take that into account. They only look at what they actually know is being built, which is, I understand.
Oh, interesting.
I guess you
I
can't
mean,
predict the
you
future.
can't predict what's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
built, I understand, but.
It's not a job I'd want to spend my life doing, but God bless them.
Do you, when we met last month, I feel like both of you had some, I would say, some concerns or hesitation or questions about the, how they came to their confidence in those numbers. Do you feel more confident after meeting with them?
I do, and the fact that they will keep looking at the numbers and we can make adjustments if necessary, coupled with the idea that if we are accepted into the MSBA and they'll do their own enrollment projections as well, makes me feel better. I don't know. That's my take.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think their population growth, I would bet the under on, like what they think 10 years, the overall population growth of Westwood is, but that's me.
Yeah,
There's
I
just
think,
not a lot of places to put people.
right. And I think going into it, Tony and I both kind of had the same approach, that they were saying that, all of these new young families are going to move into Westwood. But we feel like that's kind of always been the case, right? That's nothing new for our community. But then when they shared the information about it being an older community and people being more likely to relocate as they age, that made more sense.
Is it within our, I mean, when, I remember, because I was actually living at the Gables when this happened, but I remember the Gables was sort of initially district for Downey, and then there was kind of a split district, Downey Pine Hill, or Downey, Downey Deerfield, Downey Hanlon,
Hanlon.
and then eventually moved, I think it's dedicated
Hill.
to Pine Hill now.
Yeah.
Should we have that conversation as 22 Everett comes online, the consideration to redistrict that depending on the population?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the master planning study, right, I mean, that, I think that most of the options require a level of conversation about redistricting regardless, right?
Sure.
I think it is always, when possible, it is always better to do that as part of a well-thought-out advanced process in conjunction with something else and not as a standalone response to a immediate unplanned need. So the value of having these projections ahead of time are certainly helpful. I think that we will know more once we know, right? I think that's always the challenge. I think one of the things, at least as it relates to sort of building size and capacity in the short term, as it relates to 22 Everett, when I came here 2 years ago, Downey was bursting through the gills from a space perspective. Having moved the WABA program to Pine Hill has opened up some space in the building right now. So there's more capacity in that building right now than there was 2 years ago, to at least handle some type of short-term influx. But it does become a question 5-6 years out. But I think at that point, hopefully, we have greater certainty of where we are with the other components of the
That makes
facilities plan.
sense. That's fair.
And the only other thing to mention, and Dory will probably speak about this too, and I know Tim's going to talk about it, we're wrapping up the cell phone task force, and there's been a lot of exciting work happening, and there's going to be a community forum later this month. So that's really exciting to be making some progress on that front. And that is all I have. Anyone else?
Sean, okay.
Yes, Kevin, please.
This time I actually have something more
Great.
tangible. So the Legislative Council did our Q4 class surveys during all the class meetings in the past 2 weeks. They were focused on the quality and variety of the lunches and the breakfast programs. And so I was looking at the one we did last year, but compared to last year, the variety, the mean score of the variety and quality of the food on like a 1 through 5 scale has increased for this year, as well as a new metric we had was the friendliness of the kitchen staff, and over half of the respondents said this staff was had a 5 level on the friendliness, so that's great to see. Other things we looked at were reasons for not participating in the free breakfast program. About half of the people who could not participate said that they didn't have time, and I think that could relate to the late buses that were talked about. But I will say that ever since that discussion, my bus has come 10 minutes earlier to my stop. I'm not really sure what happened there.
You missed it the first time though, right?
I did. I missed it the first time. I was surprised.
The bus can be late, it cannot be early.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, that's
Wouldn't
great.
mind sending that around, maybe send it to Hurley or the superintendent.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of data he's looking at here.
Yeah.
I will say, you should specifically look at the rating scales, because the lingo that was used, I can't remember, there were some very funny words. And it's not just like rate it 0 to 5. There are descriptors, and they're very funny and very, like,
Engaging.
I felt outdated when I was listening to some of them. They had to be defined for me, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks.
Any other liaison reports? No? All right.
All right, so I'm happy to talk about our cell phone task force recommendations. So just for some context, as this committee knows, we established the cell phone task force at our May meeting last year to examine the research base and develop guiding principles to inform future policy decisions at the school and/or district level. We had our initial meeting in June of 2024. We had 19 members from across the school and broader community who dedicated a good solid chunk of time over a year to the work that we've done here. We began by doing a common reading of The Anxious Generation. That was our summer homework, or our summer book club, or however we want to describe that. We came back in the fall ready to talk. In the meantime, both our high school and our middle school administration recognized the need in their buildings, implemented new handbook policies this year. And we reviewed the policies, we reviewed some of the data that were collected at the building level around the implementation of the policies. So we did that. We examined the research base that was out there. During the course of this year, the Massachusetts Attorney General released a toolkit for schools and communities around electronic devices and cell phone and social media. So we reviewed that, as well as the proposed electronic device legislation that is currently at the State House. So with all of that in mind, we developed a series of recommendations. There are 8 recommendations that we're sharing publicly here tonight, and they're broken into 3 categories. So there are recommendations for policy, there are recommendations for education, and there are recommendations for the community as a whole. So to go through those, the recommendations for policy, right now we are looking, the recommendation is to maintain and continue to enforce the existing electronic device policies and school handbooks at the elementary, middle, and high school level. We did want to, actually I should also acknowledge that there wasn't really anything across the board specifically in elementary handbooks. We want to make sure those were added as well too. But we have seen the progress that has been made with those policies this year. And given what is happening, this is really bullet number 3 that I'll talk about more in a second, given the uncertainty of what may happen at the state level regarding legislation, to change our policy only to have to change it again if new legislation passes, it made more sense right now to maintain where we are right now. While, and I'm just going to jump ahead to number 3, while we monitor the progress of state legislation on electronic device policies and be prepared to respond accordingly. In addition, we wanted to make sure that we continue to gather additional data about the impact of our current policy at all levels and to regularly review the data to inform any future revisions. I know that is work that is already being done by our leadership teams in both buildings, and it's our recommendation that continue to take place. And then the final recommendation here, and this is a more concrete thing, is that communication to and among members of student activity groups and athletic teams should use approved school platforms for communication and should not use social media to communicate messages to their members. Student leaders, and we also believe that student leaders should be empowered to ensure communication practices are consistent with this recommendation. You'll see in the recommendations about the community, we talk about the research base on social media, and knowing that our students at the high school level, a good number of them are below that recommended age. To say anything other than we shouldn't be using social media in a way for all students if we're recommending it shouldn't start until, I'll just jump ahead, usage should not start until age 16. And so, we have the ability to, through policy, dictate what our staff are doing and how we communicate, particularly because we also want to make sure we have archive communication as well. But we also want to encourage, through a level of student voice, whether that's through legislative council, whether it's through a captain's council in the athletic, or some joint work of both of those groups together, to empower students to sort of identify what their own practices should be when communicating with each other. We believe that's a powerful recommendation. As it comes to education recommendations, we recommend that we assess current educational opportunities for students that emphasize face-to-face interpersonal communication to support a balanced approach to the use of educational technology. And so we see that not solely as the domain of our DLCS curriculum, nor the second bullet, but really looking across what we do as a system as a whole, knowing how, and I would just lean into the emphasizing face-to-face interpersonal communication. We also recommend creating a multidisciplinary approach to ensure that all students, I'm sorry about the typo there, to ensure that all students develop an understanding of appropriate use of technology for educational and personal use. Again, I think this sits within our DLCS curriculum, and happy to do that with the expansion in early grades 2 through 5. I think some of this is also part of our wellness curriculum. And then it's also how within departments, what we assign for students, how we do that. We want to make sure that this is across all areas. And then when it comes to the broader community, and Amanda alluded to the event, and you'll see a flyer for the event in a second, for the first kickoff of this. In partnerships with schools, with municipal offices, I want to particularly emphasize both Youth and Family Services and the Westwood Police Department. So in partnerships with schools, municipal offices, and families, provide educational opportunities for families about monitoring cell phone and social media use for students, and the importance of positive adult role modeling. I think I will admit of my own volition, I am guilty of that on occasion, and so I think that those recommendations are, we think that's really important. Listen, I made that as an I statement. If others want to co-sign that, that's fine. We also said that townwide conversation should support the establishment of community norms regarding delaying the availability of smartphones and social media for adolescents, consistent with research that recommends waiting until age 16 for social media. We had a lot of discussion about whether or not we wanted to recommend a particular age for the use of cell phones themselves. There's not really a research base that supports that right now, a particular age. There is, the research base around social media is much stronger. Of course, there is a piece, and while you can put constraints on, but once you have the smartphone, there is certainly that access to social media that is way more prevalent. But I just want to specifically call out, and I think Dory and Amanda, if you want to add to this, you certainly can as well. We had a lot of conversation about, because I think people want to know, like, what age can I get or should I wait until I get my child a cell phone? We didn't feel there was a strong enough research base to support that, but that there certainly was, there are important norms to be had as a community about supporting the delay. And so we wanted to frame it that way. This is we are going to be doing a panel discussion at Thurston Middle School on Tuesday, May 27th from 7:30 to 8:45. This is immediately following 6th grade orientation. So we figured we have a good captive audience of people that hopefully will stay at the end of orientation to hear our panel. And you can see the panelists include Katie Coulthard from Youth and Family Services, who's on our task force, Chris Elcock, who's our SRO, Todd Danforth, psychologist at Thurston, who was on our group, Tina Feely, who is a parent and a pediatrician, who was on our task force, and then Matt Kuklins, who's the principal at MJ. So we're happy to have that on May 27th. And then finally, I want to thank all the task force members who were part of our administrative team, part of our staff team. Dory and Amanda as our 2 committee members, a number of parents. We had 2 students, Kalei Kitayama and Vincent Willis, who were great participants in our group. So we were happy to have all of them there. And then I guess Amanda and Dory, I will turn over the 2 of you who were with us for all this to add anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad we've had all of these discussions. I think definitely there was, when we first met, coming up on a year ago, there was a lot of big feelings, I think, on that first call, which ironically I think was actually on Zoom because we couldn't find a time to meet in person. And I think reading the book together really helped. And I think, we did reach, I think, a point last fall where we were like, okay, where do we want to take this? And is it about cell phones? Is it about social media? Is it about both? And it really helped to have, folks like Tina Feely in the room, who's a pediatrician, local, works also with Boston Children's, as well as Katie from Westwood Youth and Family, who provides the perspective, I think, of the municipality, but then also comes at it from a lens of being a sort of certified mental health professional and sees certainly a lot. So I think everybody really brought, you talked earlier with the curriculum review about how we have experts in the community that come forward, and they certainly did for this as well. I think I'm happy with the recommendations. I'll be curious to see what happens with the state, so that maybe we can reflect some of those. I've seen some other countries making different decisions as well. And I know that at the high school, I think, Amy, you were also running a group task force of students who did some touring of another school as well to kind of see what worked and what didn't at other schools and compare it to how the students felt about what was happening here at the high school. And students felt good about what was happening here, so we were able to sort of bring that back to the group and report in. And the only other thing I would add is that when that flyer comes out, which I think is tomorrow, it'll be being sent to the community. At the very bottom, there's a place for folks to sign up, and importantly, to submit questions. Amanda and I will be sitting down to sort of categorize those questions and sending them out to the panelists ahead of time, and so that when she and I facilitate, we have, a compass for guiding the conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Dory. I think you covered a lot of it. It was really nice, I think, to do it this year after the policies had kind of been implemented. I think it took a little bit of the pressure off of us to be able to be really thoughtful and strategic. And I think Amy and her team and Mike and his team and the whole district has done a phenomenal job in kind of like running with it and putting effective policies in place. So that is great. And yeah, I agree that the different perspectives in the room were, got us all thinking, and we did have some really kind of animated conversations. I learned a lot, and I'm excited to get going with it. And this is hopefully just the first of multiple community sessions. I think we're hopeful that this will target like upper elementary, middle school, high school families, and then maybe in the fall we'll work with like, open it up more towards all families, and or maybe something specific to elementary school family. We can kind of see what the community wants. So that is that. It's exciting to be wrapping it up. It's so important.
I'm actually curious, and maybe Kevin can speak, or Amy or Mike, now that you've gone through this new policy for a year, almost a full school year, what the differences are, whether you think it was successful, whether you think that, just sort of a quick summary of what you think of the policy now that we've implemented it.
I think at the start I was, I think I was a bit resentful of it, of course, but I think I do recognize like it's I think fundamentally it's like a good change. I don't think there are times when I was like, damn, I wish I had my phone. Why is it in my pocket, right? I feel like there's really not much you can do, with your phone like during school. I think my only gripe with it is probably like S block. I think students should still be allowed more freedom with their phones during S block, but I can't be too mad at the policy.
And do you find that the students, it's being enforced, like all the students are, or is it dependent on the teacher, or is it, what's the enforcement like?
I think the enforcement still depends on the teacher, but just like the threat, I feel like just like you don't really see anyone with like their phones out unless like they have like a really good reason to or something. Like the students like kind of self-enforce it in a lot of times.
Okay. Amy, is that consistent with what you're hearing?
I would say it's consistent with what I'm seeing. Yep. Oh, you want me to go down there? Yeah, sure. Hi. I think it's consistent with what I'm seeing, and I'm not sure that we have like 100% of every cell phone in every cell phone holder. What has changed is that I don't see students accessing their phones either way in class. And so I think what that's done is really improved the learning environment in classrooms. What it hasn't done is decreased the amount of students in the hallway who might be accessing their phones. And so I think like the first goal is a really important goal, and the second goal is one we still need to work on just in terms of consistency from classroom to classroom. It just takes a really long time to create new habits, and I think our students actually have found an easier way of creating them than some of our staff have, but I think we'll get there because I think we really believe in it.
What do you mean the 3-minute passing period?
No, I mean like if I don't put my phone in the holder and it's actually in my pocket, and then I get up to use the bathroom.
Oh, okay.
And
I was gonna say,
right,
okay,
but
I got it.
remember we talked sort of
Yeah,
about like
yeah.
it can be a cop-out, right? Like it
Right.
can be the distraction when things are hard, when you don't
Right.
know who to talk to. And so I think we still are combating that.
Yeah, I will add as part of this conversation, right, I mentioned the state legislation. I didn't mention what the state legislation calls for. And so the state legislation doesn't use the word bell-to-bell explicitly, but essentially calls for a bell-to-bell ban on cell phones at schools, which is students walk in, cell phones go into some kind of, I would just say cell phone jail throughout the entirety of the day. That is what the legislation calls for.
Was it cell phones or electronic
Sorry,
devices?
excuse me. Yeah, no, thank you
Yeah,
for that.
that's different.
Yeah, so actually it's electronic devices other than those issued by the school. So that would include cell phones, that would include Apple Watches. It would actually also include bring your own device laptops. And so like, I know Steve and I have had some conversation. I think we would be okay from a budgetary perspective because we have enough Chromebooks to issue to students if need be, if we didn't have a BYOD policy. So we're going to continue to monitor what's happening. And, I was recently part of a meeting where we had representatives from the AG's office talking to us about this, where I raised this issue about like BYOD and was this an intentional thing? And they said yes, because of the ability to, use a hotspot, be able to go on and access around the school networks in ways that you can't when they're school issue devices. So more to come on that front. The legislative cycle takes a long time. But I think this is the difference between where we are now and that legislation is part of the reason why we're not looking to make any changes to policy right now, because that in and of itself would be a drastic change.
Can we also hear from Mike?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
School?
sorry.
I will say, as Mike makes his way down, I was driving soccer carpool on the way to our last meeting, and of course, my son hates that I have anything to do with this, but one of the boys in the car was like, I think it's really great. Kids are talking, and they're seventh graders, like, kids are talking to each other. Like, it's not that bad. So it was nice to hear. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's overall been a positive impact. The expectation is different in the middle school in the sense that they just have to be out of sight completely. So we've even called kids out, like, if we kind of have a feeling they have them on them, we're like, do you have your cell? And they're like, yeah, I do. And then they put it away, and it really takes out the gray area. And I think we've had a lot of parent support from that. We've seen a lot more hellos and interactions in the hallways for sure. And then I think something that I find really funny is, students are learning how to use a normal telephone and how to dial versus just say a name. So yeah, I think it's been overall very positive for us too.
Mike, in the middle school, the policy is basically bell to bell. I mean, it
Yeah,
shouldn't be
it's
out
just
during,
out.
it's
Yeah.
not during lunch, you don't
Yeah.
have it at all.
Yeah, and that's again really just taking out the gray area. And for I would say we've had very good support from parents about that. So.
And now, like, if parents need to get a message to their student during the day, they call the office.
Yep.
That's.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and if we find like some workaround has happened, we talk about it, and we talk about it with the parent too. So, and it's been well received.
So does that mean that there's like a decrease in some of the Starbucks delivery type
Yes.
things?
Yes,
Okay.
significantly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And what about when kids aren't feeling well? Do you find that they're going to the nurse, or are they texting their parent, or somehow?
Well, we're finding they're emailing their parents.
I've had that happen.
And then we still have that conversation about the importance of going to see the nurse first. And I mean, I think that's just in general been this response to COVID where more parents are working at home, so they're more accessible. And so students are thinking like, oh, mom's just home or dad's just home, and I can just text them or call them or email them or whatever. And it's easier. So we're trying to break those habits still, I think, for everybody.
Okay.
So, yeah, but it's been good.
Can I ask one question of the committee, but also you might have insight into this? And I'm thinking back to the office hours we had in the fall that I attended, and a conversation we were having was around cell phones, and one of the parents really wanted to practice this idea of not allowing their child to have a cell phone until a later grade. And that parent was struggling because, as soon as they walk out the door, at Thurston, it happened to be a Thurston parent, everyone pulls out their phone and they're making plans. And this poor child doesn't have a phone, so they're socially left out. And so when I look at what I like to see about your recommendations is that recommendation around, how do we bring these conversations into the classroom, and how do we think about helping our students help their friends, who may or may not have a cell phone, be a part of the social gatherings, because I feel like that is part of the pressure of parents. I mean, as a parent of a rising sixth grader, I'm like bracing myself for this argument. That can we help our kids find other ways to make those after school plans or those touch points so that they don't feel like the social outcast, and then they're left out, and the parents are then pressured, and then they give in and they cave, and when we know that's not necessarily the best choice for their family. How's that? I mean, I'm basically
I haven't
for
heard
personal
any.
therapy.
No one's
in
really
my mind.
reached out to me for questions about that, to be honest with you. And I haven't really heard it as a topic of conversation among our guidance counselors.
Okay.
I think the Thurston student kind of talks right after school and is pretty scheduled, but then they're either going to Camel's parking lot area or the All Town or the Starbucks. So everything kind of happens quickly, and I think they each support each other in sort of figuring that out.
And I think, like, this came up a little bit in terms of the different mechanisms that kids could use. So maybe, like, families would opt not to get a smartphone, but get, like, a bark phone or a text.
Gizmo.
Yeah, like, get another, like, a text-only capability or whatever. And hopefully, that could be, like, maybe Steve could, join one of the community forums down the road to talk about the
Yeah.
different options.
Yeah.
No pressure, but,
And we have
so
kids
parents
coming
know.
in the afternoon at dismissal time to call home, and we let them, and it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I find personally like that the kids make the plans in person, but they text parents to
Yeah.
say, can I do this? Can I go here? Can I go there? So it's not texting each other necessarily.
Okay.
It's like,
Gonna let you
they're
know
all
I'm doing
standing
this.
out there in front of the bus saying, should I get on this kid's bus or not?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
that's what
Yeah,
that's how
that
it's
is
been
right.
working out.
Okay, okay. All right, I'm
Thanks,
gonna
Mike.
Thank you,
call in
Mike.
on all of you to tell me. In just a few short months. Thank you.
All right. That's all for the cell phone piece. Hand it back over.
Yeah, so in terms of, I'll leave this up for right now. So facility study forums. So we have talked about wanting to do some facility study forums. We know that there's the challenge of May being a month when everything happens everywhere all at once, including town meeting happening a little bit later. We've got everything leading up to high school graduation, all the things we're excited about. So we are looking to do we're gonna do 2 forums this spring. We're looking to do them June 3rd and June 4th, Tuesday and Wednesday. We will publicize this out to the community, certainly. June 3rd would be in person here in the Little Theater. June 4th, we would do a virtual option. I'm thinking a 6:30 start for each of those events, 6:30 or 7 o'clock. I'm happy to get feedback from the committee on those. Where we would do sort of whether it's a full or a little more abbreviated presentation that we did here for the school committee when we released the presentation back in April, and really have some back and forth, hear what people's thoughts are in the community. May I know you and I had a little preview, right? We were both at the MJPTO a couple of nights ago,
Yeah.
and just hearing some initial feedback without doing the whole slides with everything for context. But I just want to get some feedback from the committee about those dates moving forward, knowing that we will do many more of these come fall, leading up to our decision point in December.
So I've had some thoughts since the Martha Jones PTO meeting, and I'm just wondering if it makes sense as an alternative. June is very busy for everybody, a lot going on. I don't anticipate us getting any new information over the summer, right? We're going to be presenting the same information in the fall that we are in June. I'm just wondering, and given that when you and I spoke to the PTO, there were a lot of people there who were processing all of that information. I just wonder, does it make more sense in June to send out some kind of summary of the facility study, some high level, and we can talk about what that looks like, and say in that mailing to everybody, here is a summary of the presentation. We're going to be holding community meetings in the fall about this. We'd love for you to preview this information, submit to us any questions that you want answered for the fall, instead of trying to hold the same forums in the fall that we would have in June, but having lost a summer where people would think about it, forget about it, and then have to rethink about it. I don't know. I'm just thinking, because we haven't pushed anything out aside from what we did in our meeting, and there were a lot of blank faces kind of staring at us at the PTO, because it was so much information to process. And I just think maybe it's better, I don't know if it's better or not, but it's just another idea to give people the information, let them read about it, let them think about it, let them come up with questions, and then we do the fall presentations, the full-blown presentation, and we can also have the benefit of having questions ahead of time that we can address. I don't know. It was just something I was thinking of. Unless you guys would rather do the full forums.
I guess I have 2 questions. Well, I'm I don't have a strong view. I mean, June is a terrible time, and
I just don't know how much engagement we're gonna
that's what I
get.
mean. It's a history here of doing things in June on school projects a long time ago that didn't work out well. So I'm a little cognizant of that. But that being said, I guess my question is, it'd be helpful to know the plan. Like, in other words, we're gonna do these, we're gonna basically do a shortened version of what the school committee did. We're gonna do that now in September, and then October, November, we're gonna do more, go into Thurston cafeteria, we're gonna do like interactive. It'd be helpful to know the plan, I guess, from here till whenever we have to make a decision, end of December, or
December
what-
school committee,
whatever.
yeah.
I guess that would be, what's, I guess, one question, or just be helpful to know the plan, because like, yeah, I guess that's my question. And then, to your point, I mean, we probably don't have time, but it would be nice to have like, people don't have a lot of attention span. If we had something that was more like a 12-minute, now it's probably don't have the time with Westwood Media to get down to like a 12-minute. If we had some short and condensed version that you could actually send out with that, as opposed to
Yeah.
watching an hour and a half, I don't know how long the school committee was, an hour.
It was long.
I don't know.
Yeah, that would
But
be
I think
helpful.
the plan, more important, I'd be helpful to know the plan of what we're planning, not just, presenting, but also in getting feedback.
I mean, I was sort of envisioning, I don't know about you, but that these forums would be the feedback, right? That we would
Right.
go in there, we'd present it. So I don't think we would do more after the I mean, are we planning like sticker sessions or?
No, I think, I mean, in my vision, or let me, that was a weird way to say that. What I am envisioning, excuse me, is that we would, the forums serve two purposes, I think. One is to share information in a way where when you have people in a room, it's a more engaging thing than watching something passively online or reading emails. I think the idea of doing a video piece, I think there are certainly some legs to that, right? Whether that's a voice over a slideshow or something like that, or I don't think, so part of it I think is about doing that. I think part of it is about hearing people's initial reactions, so that if there are things that we want to make sure that we think about, things that we haven't considered as a committee, then we have time to process that, internalize that in our decision-making process. And so I think those are really, it serves both, I think the idea of the forum serve both purposes. I think to your point, Tony, like, admittedly, we have not mapped out like a schedule of we're going to these things then.
Yeah.
But if I were to say, what are the kinds of, I will be out as much as need be in the fall doing these presentations, right? So I'd envision we're gonna do some level of community forums, whether they're here in the little theater, or we do them in the town library, or we do them in both the library on High Street and the Islington, right? We do those in a couple of different places. We go and do things at each of the schools, not necessarily just the PTO meetings, but we meet people where they are. We do it that way. I would envision we try to coordinate something with the Council on Aging, do something with them. If there are other groups in town that we want to make sure that we hit. So there's a series of all these kinds of events. But I think what I'm hearing, and certainly this is something we can do for the June meeting, is map out, like, these are the, while we may not have the dates, right? But at least these are the kinds of events that we anticipate doing in that point in time. I think to your initial comment, Maya, I don't necessarily see that as an either or. I think I can see that as a both and. That being said, admittedly, I don't know what the history of events in June.
No, I was being
Right.
a bit tongue in cheek, but
Yeah,
I just don't want to waste people's time.
Yeah.
Right? And June is just such a crazy month for everybody. And if we're going to feed all these people information and then everyone goes to the Cape for 3 months and then come back and we're not giving them any new information, we're just sort of, I don't know. I just wasn't sure why we're trying to jam it into June when we're going to be doing them all fall. We don't have to make a decision until December. And maybe what we do is we do a video accompanied by something else to push the information out in June. I don't know.
My impression is that part of the reason we were doing this is to provide, as Tim mentioned, the opportunity for people to provide feedback, the people who have been engaged and paying attention. So maybe it doesn't have to be a meeting, maybe it could be another mechanism, or, for people, it could be more of like a office hours type setting, the people who have been engaged and following along, if they want to come talk about it, great, where we're not necessarily trying to draw new people in and going through the whole presentation, I don't know. Or we could send some sort of survey. I do think we owe it to the people who have been following along to provide that
I
opportunity.
agree. I think presenting something in April, but then not providing an opportunity for discussion until September is too long of a, I understand what you're saying about the Cape in the
Right.
summer, and I think that that's true. And I do also think that there are people who would really like to discuss this now, and waiting till September is a little, it's too much.
I agree. I just think that, I don't know.
But like, maybe in office hours, like an office hour, a focused office hours would be potentially an option rather than a big presentation.
Right.
And then, I like Tony's idea about doing the informational video, because you're right, watching an hour and a half discussion on school committee is, it's a big commitment.
Yeah, and
So,
it's no offense, it's nothing, and Dorothy came here and did a great job, but it's like, we don't need to get into the details of module this, module this,
Right.
module this,
Oh,
can we fit
no.
on the site? I mean, we need to really make this, what do we need to get from, what do we need to share with people now, and get the feedback from now, I think.
Yeah. I, just to push back a little bit on your office hours, is I still think we'll have some folks who attend who like just, not that we're not inviting those folks, but people who have not necessarily been along for the ride or didn't see the April meeting also come and, kind
Yeah.
of come not having that background.
Right.
So I think we'd ultimately have to go through the background anyway.
Could we send, like, maybe if people register, we send them like pre-read the,
Yeah.
and it's up to, like, if they want to be
Yeah, I
informed
mean-
ahead of time.
I mean, at that point, may as well do the forum.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm not objecting to the forum. I'm just trying to think what's the best use of our time and everyone else's time. But to your point, if we feel like we should start having these discussions shortly after presenting the information, then we should do something in June. So we could, I mean,
I really like this idea. I think we, regardless, will need to have a little bit of a, a promo video of what are our options, and it can't be an hour and a half school committee
No.
meeting. I mean, no one's, that's a big ask. So how and in what way would we pare that down
Yeah,
to get to the meat of it so that people have enough information to then participate in a conversation?
as the committee's talking here, I'm thinking
I think you're right.
that you can take the presentation, and whether it's 2 parts or 3 parts, I'm not sure, but right now I'm thinking you do 2 different videos. You do a video that talks about sort of the framing of our current state and the enrollment projections, right? That's kind of that underlying, here's the state of our buildings, here's the assessment of our buildings, here's that consumer report style presentation, and here's what the enrollment projections say. And then a second video is just, here are the potential options going forward. Opening the video by saying, if you haven't watched part 1, we encourage you to watch part 1, but some people just want to jump to the solutions anyway. But this way you can break into maybe, I don't know how long those chunks are. They certainly shouldn't be any longer than 10 minutes. You send those out mid-May, and then with that, talk about there being a forum and an opportunity for people to come. And I think you could do a pared down version of a presentation, but it's really more about the conversation discussion at that point in time. And if 3 people show up, then we'll have a really robust conversation with 3 people. And if 100 show up, then that's great, right? And, and I think that will also help inform what our strategy is for outreach in the fall.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of what I'm envisioning as I'm hearing this conversation.
Dory pointed out that June 3rd is the townwide ballot for the fire station.
Oh, so we really have an issue. Thank you for flagging that.
That was Dory. That was Dory.
Good catch.
That doesn't, I mean,
Well,
I feel like we should
I feel like
keep
we
it
should,
separate.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We could,
best laid plans.
But I think we could still probably keep the second and maybe
Yeah.
find another day, the 4th or later that week, or.
Yeah.
I think we had said the 4th, 3rd and 4th, right?
Yeah.
So I want to fully acknowledge, is doing something on the eve of the townwide vote on the 2nd the right choice?
The 3rd.
Or, no, if we did something on the 2nd
on
in
the
advance of the
eve.
3rd, right?
I don't think so.
And so we don't, I think maybe Amanda, you and I can have this conversation offline, not here live in public session. But I just want to flag that to acknowledge, I don't, we do live within one ecosystem as a community, right? I think that
I also don't know that there's anything wrong with just doing one session.
I was gonna say
I
that.
would maybe go more towards virtual
Yeah.
if that were the case. But I think it would be okay to, I think if we just had one,
On the 4th.
yeah. I think that would be okay.
Yeah.
I like that you want to accommodate both
Yeah.
options, but I think maybe that's the compromise, you know, that in terms of using people's time wisely, maybe offering one
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
yeah.
If we do that, I'm fine. I think we could use this as a chance. We should make sure we're gathering the data we need, because people are gonna still probably be like, they're on Zoom. They're not gonna say, start yelling and screaming. Probably, they could, but they won't. But that, I mean, if we get
They
30 people
might.
on, we say, we make sure we send them a survey immediately afterwards and say, what, you know, what did you understand? What are your questions? Because that might have then informed what we do in the fall. We need to gather some data, because I don't know what
Right.
people are thinking.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know.
We create a Google form, we drop it right in the chat in the middle of the Zoom.
Something easy,
right,
yeah.
Yeah. I really like the idea of a part 1, part 2 video, state of the schools, and a solutions video, 2 videos that outline that. I'm a little worried about timing. Mid-May is next week.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
And I have heard feedback from some parents that sometimes we send out invitations to things too close to the event, particularly for working parents. So I'd like to, if we're gonna do this, we should get it out as soon as possible. I think a month's notice is reasonable, 2 weeks is not.
Yeah.
So I've gotten that feedback from people.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Agreed. That was part of the reason why we wanted to send the thing about the cell phones tomorrow for an event on the
Yeah.
27th.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so I think I have direction from the committee, so I
Great.
appreciate that. We'll plan on the virtual thing on June 4th. We'll do a blast out, hopefully, even if it's a voiceover present, like you record a Zoom session where you're screen sharing, you go through the video, do that in 2 parts. We can do something like that. So we try to blast that out ASAP, invite people for June 4th, have some kind of a feedback form that is ready to go with that. And then we figure out where we are from there.
Yep.
So,
If I can just make one more comment and argue, and it sounds like we're moving towards having something in June. There is a sense of urgency about this, and to Dory, your point of, you know, we've presented this in April and we're not gonna talk about it again to the fall. Feels like we're not, you know, really serious about the urgency of the issue. And I wouldn't want that to be the perception.
I think that's exactly why we need to do it.
thank you, I appreciate it.
But I'm just going to reinforce, this may seem obvious to somebody like me that has no attention span, as much as we can make this, what do we need to do, what are the questions, because basically the question we have to answer by the end of the year is, what do we put forward in the MSBA? Is that fair? I mean,
Yeah.
that's,
Just school, just school.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You
which
don't need
builds.
to put forth a project, just the
Exactly,
school.
exactly,
And I
so,
think that's important to, you know, to bring the community along with,
Yeah.
is, you know, we don't need to take on this entire solution at the forefront. We're just taking the next step.
Yeah.
And what step does the town want us to take?
Great.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it. Last item, special ed review.
Yes.
So the last discussion item tonight is a proposed special education review. I know I've alluded to this at a previous meeting. This is a discussion item tonight, it's not an action item, but really wanted to frame this around looking at doing a proposed external review of our special education programming in the district, both examining what our current status is and looking at what our future needs are. We would identify 2 key areas of focus. One is around preschool programming. I know we had a lot of conversation about preschool earlier this year, and I think that's going to help put us having that external review of that, knowing not only from a programming perspective, but also from a space needs perspective. I think there's a real value in having that conversation. And also looking at our substantially separate programming. I think in particular, when we see, we know what's happening, for example, in rising enrollment in WABA in the preschool and elementary school. What are the implications going to be as we move forward over multiple years? There's in that regard, and then also sort of looking at student profile. Are our programs currently meeting our students' needs? We have obviously a long track record of success in the district, but we want to make sure that we're ahead of what our needs are and not reacting to what our future needs are. So we want to look a little more proactively at that. So any kind of a review, including examination of district data, we'd want to, there'd be interviews with staff and with families. There are a number of organizations that conduct these reviews. I know that when I had my conversations with members of CPAC earlier this year, I had kind of floated this concept. I certainly felt like I was receiving positive feedback around that concept. And so I wanted to bring this to the committee tonight just as a discussion item for sort of directional approval in moving this direction before we looked at trying to do any kind of outreach to entities that do this kind of work. If we can get somebody on board, they could start some of the district data review this summer, theoretically, and then be able to conduct the interviews and the visits to programs in the fall. So with that being said, I'll open it up to the committee if you have any comments or questions or discussion.
Makes sense to me, but
I think this is going to be a pressure point, special education, given all the budget cuts that we're seeing at the national level. So I
Yeah.
think this is going to be really helpful for us.
Yeah, I didn't want to put a negative spin on this, but yeah, that is also a factor.
Any other thoughts to share?
Just for folks who do not know, could you explain the difference between the substantially separate programming and other programming that we have? 'Cause
Yeah.
It doesn't encompass everything.
Yeah, no, yeah, I mean, certainly there would be a look at everything, right? But there's a difference between looking at everything and then where areas of focus are, right? So students who receive the majority of their instruction outside of the general education classroom because of their identified area of disability or need, there are multiple different profiles of students, whether it's in our WABA program, our focus program, programs like that. And so part of the reason there is both a moral and educational reason and a financial reason why we have substantially separate programs in the district. The first one is really more important. It's the moral and educational reason, right? Where we want to make sure that students can remain in the least restrictive environment with their peers in district when possible, to be able to support them in trying to access in accessing the general curriculum in a way that's consistent with their goals and their IEPs. From a financial perspective, if we did not have substantially separate programming in our district, we would be looking to send students to outside placements, whether that's a collaborative or a private setting, or some other setting, which not only removes students from the environment of the district and with their peers in district, but is also a much costlier impact financially, right? And so it's really it's a both and, where the educational and students' needs are first and foremost, but there's also residual impact financially to the district in a positive way when we have really robust, substantially separate programming.
Yeah. I'm in favor of this. I think it would be helpful to see, trajectories and trends and be able to look at that data when we're thinking about, any changes in our programming or any different decisions we might make or the impact it'll have on our budget, is to have kind of real data to fall back on instead of maybe anecdotal or perceptions and things like that. So the more, data we have, I think the better we'll be in those conversations and better informed to make the decisions.
So I'm certainly
Great.
hearing directional support from the committee, and
Thank you.
I will move forward from there. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to action items. Can I have a motion to approve our April 7th meeting minutes?
so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passed. And then, Tony, would you mind taking us through the vote for the
So I have to read this, right?
participation in school choice?
Good thing I talk fast. All right. Whereas the Educational Reform Act of 1993 requires that the enrollment of non-resident students under the school choice provision, unless the committee votes by June 1st not to participate, and whereas the school choice provision reallocates funds from the sending district and awards such funds to the receiving district, and whereas the maximum reimbursement allowed by the school choice provision is less than Westwood's per pupil expenditure, which means Westwood Public Schools would be required to subsidize each choice student, and whereas once Westwood accepts a choice student, Westwood must keep such student through graduation, regardless of whether Westwood's demographic situation has changed. And whereas it's likely the number of students will return to the sending districts or otherwise leave Westwood, thus creating a potential income loss, now hereby be it resolved that the Westwood School Committee respectfully declines to participate in the school choice program, provided, however, that surrounding school districts subsequently and prior to June 1st decide to accept the provisions of school choice. The Westwood School Committee reserves the right to do likewise in order to protect its fiduciary interest in this matter.
Thank you. I have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
So we'll do a roll call vote. Maya?
Yes.
Yes. Dory?
Yes.
Joanna?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And then Mike is coming down for the approval of a donation to Thurston Middle School.
This is hopefully a nice way to end our night, I think, or wrap it up. So, towards the end of March on the weekend, I received an email. The subject line was an old man and an unexpected gift. And it was one of those things that I hesitated because I thought maybe Steve was sending me something to test filtering my fishing knowledge. But I opened it up, and I'll share a little bit about what it had said. It said in the email, this story is about one of the most uplifting, unexpected, encouraging, and emotional experiences I've had in a very long time. It speaks to the caliber of the group of kids attending your school, their perception and insight, their manners, their values, and the values of their families. And I'm sure the atmosphere you structure at your school. So we had a group of students after school one day in the Camellus parking lot, a group of 6th graders, see a really cool car, and that car was about ready to run over pieces of glass. And our students stopped the car from driving and engaged in a conversation with an elderly person. And were really fascinated by the car, so they had a long conversation about the car. And as they were talking about the car, one of the students asked if they should take off their shoes because they were going to check out the car. And another student asked something about how much the car would, or this car must cost a lot of money. And one of our students said, dude, you know you're not supposed to talk about money. And so they discussed the car for a really long time, and the money conversations came up again. And the person said to them that in life, you know, they've learned a lot of lessons, and one of the lessons that they've learned is to find someone that you want to spend the rest of your life with, someone that you love, and to also find something that you love doing. And so they had this really positive experience. I was able to sort of go out on the recess field and ask some questions and get a good sense of the 6th grade group that was there. So I've called as many parents as I could possibly identify as students who were there that day. And the person's email really just said, you know, a lot of people my age like to complain about kids today and all that holier than thou stuff. But if these Westwood 6th graders are any sample of the future, our country is going to be safe and well. Congratulations to you, your teachers, the administrators, to the kids at your school, to those kids' families. Yesterday was a riveting event in my life and an invitation to reinvent some of my own thoughts and beliefs about the state of our world and about the kids in general, and goes on and on. So I spent about a month trying to arrange a meetup, and I did. And I had coffee for over an hour with this person, and his gift to us was $6,000 to go towards continuing to develop the culture of 6th graders at Thurston Middle School. So I explained that one of the trips that we do is to go to Treetop Adventures and quickly try to put together 4 elementary schools of kids coming together for the first time and developing relationships. And one of the things that the person was most impressed about was the fact that there were no adults around. They did this organically and on their own. Again, the cell phones weren't out. And it was a really special moment. So it was one of those moments that really made me proud of everything that we do here, proud of our community, and it's a great thing for our kids. So, yeah. So that's the story behind the donation. So hopefully you'll accept it.
Thank you.
Rejected.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to the anonymous donor that he took the time to share that and for the financial contribution. That's really special. So does anybody want to make a motion to accept the donation?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Would you like to talk about the next scholarship? Or the scholarship?
Yeah, sure. So there is, we have been approached in order to establish the Hurley Graphic Art Memorial Scholarship. The criteria is the scholarship committee should use is to select the student winner who exhibits kindness through their artistic creativity and art expression. It'll be an annual scholarship of $500 each year at graduation time in the memory of Lauren Hurley.
Nice.
So.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the scholarship?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Any new business anyone would like to bring up? No? Okay. And then we are going to adjourn and move into executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Can I?
Sorry, as well as, there's a second.
Oh,
Yeah,
gosh.
sorry.
Sorry, thank you. As well as to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if it may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the committee. And we will not be moving back into open session. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting's adjourned.